This morning, bold predictions in new polls about Beto O'Rourke, Greg Abbott, and Attorney General Ken Paxton. What do Democrats think about Senator Joe Manchin? And are they ahead or behind now going into 2022? Congressman Mark Vesey joins us from the Capitol. Voters in Austin resoundingly rejected Proposition A, but those who supported it are now planning their next moves. Matt Makoviak lays out what they are looking at. The Build Back Better Act, one of President Biden's priorities, but what would it mean for Texas specifically? U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo tells us what's coming. And Republicans won big races last week, and they did so without Donald Trump's help. The question now, does that relieve pressure on Greg Abbott to go along with him?
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Jason Whiteley. We appreciate you going inside Texas politics with us this day. Let's begin with some of the political headlines that you might have missed over the last few days. A brand new poll shows that Greg Abbott leads Beto O'Rourke if the former Democratic congressman decides to run for governor. UT and the Texas Tribune released this Friday. Abbott is ahead of O'Rourke by 9 points, but, and here's the but, this is a three-person race with a fictitious third candidate. Another survey, a head-to-head survey from Rice University and the Texas Hispanic Policy Foundation has Abbott and Beto within 1 point. A lot more on this in a moment. It's the end of an era in the Texas Senate. Eddie Lucio Jr. is retiring. He's a Democrat, but Senator Lucio has earned a reputation for voting with Republicans on some crucial social issues. Lucio's district stretches down the Texas coast from Corpus Christi to Brownsville. He is 75 years old. Texas Republicans flipped a Democratic House seat in San Antonio. Republican John Lujan won the race last Tuesday for House District 118. This was a special election to replace a Democrat, Leo Pacheco, who left the legislature to go teach. But the fact that another Democrat could not hold on to that seat could be indicative of what 2022 holds in store. Let's begin with that vote on the Build Back Better Act. It is one of President Biden's priorities, but Democrats have fought over it for months. More on what it entails in a moment and a little later in our program here. First, though, the politics of all this and Democratic reaction to last week's election. Congressman Mark Vesey represents a wide swath of North Texas from Fort Worth to Dallas and spoke to us from his office in D.C. Congressman Vesey, welcome back to our program. Give me an idea of what it's like on the Hill right now, because Democrats have worked and squabbled and waited and fought for a long time to finally get here.
There's always going to be disagreements inside of a family, and we had disagreements on how we should move this bill forward. But we're going to get it passed, and it's going to be good for Texas, and it's going to be good for America.
But those disagreements played out very publicly, and they played out for a long time. Here we are in November, and they were still playing out here at the beginning of the month. Do you think that gave or is giving Republicans anything to run on? Do you think there's any damage done to Democrats because of this?
Of course, you never want something like that to play out in public. You never do. I think that it's good for the American public to sort of see that people do need to be able to work with each other and that there is a lot of back and forth. But you do want to try to minimize that to show people that, hey, you're getting things done. I think that every Democratic member of the House and Senate should always, even if we're in a Biden plus 20 district, that we should always try to think of it as we are in a Biden plus 1 district.
Let's switch gears and talk about the Voting Rights Act for a moment. Yep. Republicans again have blocked the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act in the Senate. This is not going to pass, as you well know, Congressman, unless the Democrats in the Senate eliminate the filibuster. Republicans have done so. They are not afraid to do so. Why are Democrats afraid to exercise this tool?
It's not clear that they have all the support that they need
from Democrats, right?
From Democrats in the Senate. And that's just the reality. But I would say that we need to continue to let them know, hey, we need to pass John Lewis Voting Rights Act. It's necessary. It's a must, unless you want to spend the rest of your career in the Senate working on the minority side of the aisle.
Well, speaking of that support, obviously the most powerful man in Washington, D.C. right now is the senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin. He's single-handedly, deciding what part of the Democratic priorities move, which parts do not move. I'm curious what it's like on Capitol Hill. Is he welcome at Democratic dinner parties? Is he welcome at Democratic happy hours? What's it like when you see him around the halls of Congress?
He's well respected. People like him. He has opinions. People understand also in the Democratic Party that if Joe Manchin is not the Democratic senator from West Virginia, then there's no Democratic senator from West Virginia. West Virginia, has changed. It's a challenge now for Democrats, and people understand that. But at the same time, they certainly want to be able to move forward this agenda that is good for the country, and will continue to reach out to the senator. And when we see him in the hallways, we'll say, hey, we need to get this passed, Joe. And I think that he understands that well. And people actually do like him and see him as a smart member. But we want to obviously get this passed. There's just no question about that.
I want to ask about the election results we saw on Tuesday. Democrats barely kept the governorship in New Jersey. Democrats lost to Republicans the governorship in Virginia. What do you think those results are telling people about what to expect next November this time?
I think for Democrats, it gives us a chance to really see what we need to do going into 2022. I don't think that 2022 has to be as bad for Democrats as everyone is predicting. I just don't believe that. I think that we've learned a lot from Virginia, and that there are certainly lessons that can be learned. And people.
What are those lessons, Congressman?
I think
what was learned from Virginia? Yeah.
I think the first one is that you have to be able to appeal to everybody. I think that's hugely important. I also think that we need to remind the American public of the failures of the Trump administration. I truly believe that a lot of the issues that we're facing right now with supply chain, with fuel costs, but Joe Biden has been in office since January. Joe Biden hadn't been in office for 2 or 3 years. It's utterly ridiculous to say that all this was created in just a few months. It's asinine to actually even to say that or even imply that.
Congressman, going into 2022, are Democrats ahead or behind?
I think that we're in a good place right now. I think that we obviously would have loved to had won in Virginia. We would have liked to have seen different results in Virginia, but we have time to turn it around. And so, look, it's always tough when your president is in power and you're the party trying to defend seats in the midterm. It's always tough. But I think that we have learned a lot since a couple of days ago, and that we are ready to move forward.
Congressman, we always appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's get back to some new poll numbers from that UT and Texas Tribune survey out on Friday, specifically how Texans feel about the changes to voting laws that were passed over the summer. Well, Texans are split pretty much evenly on this, as you can see, on whether laws should be more strict, less strict, or just left alone. Ross Ramsey is the co-founder and executive editor of the Texas Tribune. He is in Austin as always. Ross, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Well, we're doing well here. Your poll went deeper with this question too, really dug down in here to ask whether the election system discriminates also against racial and ethnic groups. What were your biggest takeaways from these results?
Well, the biggest takeaway is that it's a partisan divide. Like so many of these questions, Democrats think it does discriminate. Republicans think it does not discriminate. And even when you go back to that question on whether you think the laws ought to be stricter or less strict, you don't know specifically which part of the voting and election laws they're talking about. It could be that two people who completely disagree think the laws should be stricter, but just in a different way.
Yeah, the lines are clear on that one. Let's talk about this being campaign season. And this being campaign season, public school library books are now in the crosshairs and now controversial. Greg Abbott putting his voice into this debate. What's that all about?
Well, Matt Krause jumped first. He's a Fort Worth state legislator who's running for attorney general and came out with a list of, I think, more than 800 books that he said should be questioned, whether they're in libraries, why they're in libraries, what they have in them, Greg Abbott chimed in on this. This was a big issue in the Virginia governor's race that the Republicans just won. And I think we'll see it outside of the governor and attorney general's race. This one's catching fire with Republican candidates.
Yeah, certainly so. It will likely be around for time to come. Ross, back to you in a moment. Thank you.
Thanks.
Coming up, the Build Back Better Act, one of President Biden's priorities. What does it mean for Texas specifically? The U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, tells us what is coming to this state. Plus, voters in Austin resoundingly rejected Proposition A, but the group behind it is not going away. Matt Makoviak lays out what they plan to do next. And if you want to keep up with Texas politics during the week, you should subscribe to our podcast. It's called Y'all-itics. New content, fresh interviews. Episodes drop every Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. Now to the vote on the Build Back Better Act. Democrats admittedly are trying to do a better job of explaining it. So this morning, the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, tells us what it will bring to Texas.
It's going to bring universal pre-K to every family. So 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds will be able to go to public school just like they could kindergarten. It's going to make sure that every single Texan has access to broadband, high-speed, affordable broadband. And by the way, that's all the small businesses. A lot have struggled who aren't tech-enabled. It's going to put a check in the pocket of people who have kids, just because we all know we love our kids, but they come with extra expenses. It's going to bring down healthcare costs. There's a lot in this. For example, to help keep mom or dad at home instead of going into a nursing home, which is expensive and not always the right thing. It provides more money for home care workers. So much of the coverage has been focused on the slogan or the amount of money. And the reality is this is just bread and butter issues. They're going to help Texans get through the day and get through the week, do their jobs and take care of their families.
Now to Austin, where last Tuesday voters said no to Proposition A there on the ballot. That was the measure that would have mandated that Austin hire more police officers. Firefighters even fought against it in that city. But the group behind Prop A says it's not going away. We spoke to the co-founder, Matt Makoviak. Hey, Matt, welcome back to the program. Let's talk about Tuesday night. You had a few days to look in the rearview mirror since then. Why do you think voters rejected Proposition A?
Yeah, you know, we had a tremendous success on May earlier this year with Save Austin Now and reinstating the camping ban in our city and ending the homeless camping ordinance. And a lot of the same people that fought us on this latest effort fought us on that effort. You know, I think as I've been thinking about the last few days, that issue was very visible. And I think a lot of voters concluded on their own that the camping ordinance had to come to an end. You know, on this issue, saying, look, our police staffing level is down considerably and violent crime is rising. I think that took, you know, us making rational and arguments and educating voters. And the other side, you know, made the argument that this was too expensive and that it could lead to cuts in city services. We don't believe those arguments were honest or likely to actually happen, but they were made very effectively. And in the end, voters decided not to require 2.0 police officers per 1,000 population. Keep in mind, Jason, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio didn't defund their police. The only city that did that in Texas is Austin. And when they did that, since they've done that, it's led to a 300 police officer shortage just in 1 year. And we're having that happen at a time when homicides are up 90% over the last year.
Well, I've read that you're talking about, you know, possibly putting this back on the ballot in May. Does that make sense so soon after this?
Well, we have lots of options for May. And of course, our city has lots of challenges. We have challenges related to affordability, challenges related to transparency in city government and efficiency of government spending. We have significant transportation infrastructure challenges. And yes, I do believe we have public safety challenges as well. Keep in mind, if we were to do that, we'd have to probably get moving here in the next 30 days because it takes 60 days to collect petitions, it takes a month to fight it out in the courts over ballot language, and then 60 days to raise money and run the campaigns. And before you know it, it's time for people to vote again. So these decisions end up having to be made sooner rather than later. We have heard some encouraging words in the last couple of days since Prop A failed, that the city is going to allow the hiring of 300 more police officers over the next year. from the city, both city leaders made directly to the police leadership and to the police association leadership. So if they follow through with that, that's going to be an improvement. It's not going to be enough, and it's not going to be what we wanted, but it is going to be better than where we are now.
Will Save Austin now put anything on the May ballot?
We'll see. We haven't decided yet. We have to understand exactly what happened here. We had a very significant victory in May. We had a significant defeat in November. And so we want to be thoughtful and see what voters were telling us, look through the data and see why this happened. So we're going to learn from it first.
But the clock is ticking on you guys. I mean, you have to make a decision here pretty quickly, don't you?
We will. We'll have probably 3 or 4 weeks. If we decide we're going to try to take advantage of the May window, we'd have to get moving in probably a month or so. And so that is a daunting thing. Not a lot of time to relax and recharge. But look, we believe our city can be a world-class city. It can be a great place to live, work, and raise a family. It was that way when I was growing up in Austin. It has become worse in the last 2 or 3 years. Our standard of living has decreased, and our city's not addressing these major challenges we're facing, whether it be affordability, whether it be transportation, whether it be public safety. And that's why Save Austin Now was started on a nonpartisan basis. And so we're going to continue to fight for standard of living for average Austinites who live here.
Are you all actively recruiting right now candidates to run for mayor to replace the outgoing mayor?
So next November, we're going to have half our city council, 5 out of 10 seats, and the mayor's office will be up. And now we just learned we're going to have a special election, likely in early March for a council seat. Yeah. So yes, we're actively recruiting candidates. We need mainstream people who are focused on solving problems. It's not about Republican versus Democrat. You don't even run as a partisan figure at the city level. You don't run in primaries. You just run as individuals. So yes, we are recruiting candidates. We want to find people that want to make the city better. They're not going to be focused on ideological agendas, but focused on actually solving problems.
Matt, we'll be watching to see what happens. Thanks for the time.
Thanks.
Coming up, Republicans won some big races last week, but here's the thing. They did so without the help of Donald Trump. So is that going to relieve pressure on Republicans like Greg Abbott? Something we'll discuss next on the Roundtable.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Ross Ramsey is back with us from the Texas Tribune in Austin. Bud Kennedy is here from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And Bernadine Steptoe is the political producer at WFAA in Dallas and joins us each week for this segment. Ross, let's start with you and the survey you guys released on Friday, specifically showing the governor's race, 3-person race, Abbott, Beto, and potentially someone else. And in your survey, Abbott is way ahead by 9 points. What if that third person isn't in there? Does that extra 7% votes or percentage points, does that go to the Beto or the Democratic candidate?
I assume the people that aren't with either one of them now, kind of split evenly between them. It's Abbott's race to lose, but we're very early in the race. First of all, Beto hadn't declared yet, and they haven't started slinging at each other. So by this time next year, we'll have a pretty good idea. I guess a couple of weeks before this time next year, we'll have a pretty good idea of what that race really looks like. Yeah,
but all polls right now are really what ifs because, as Ross said, Beto is not in the race.
Well, but what this poll said, and a lot of people said when they saw it Friday, is that this is wide open for a third-party candidate. You have a governor who's popular, but also has really high unfavorable ratings. You have whether it's Matthew McConaughey or someone else. If Matthew McConaughey has a political consultant, he's probably saying, go ahead and run. Abbott's beatable and Beto can't win.
And Bernadine, if you are Beto O'Rourke, you saw the Texas Hispanic Policy Foundation Rice University poll earlier in the week. You see the Texas Tribune and UT poll on Friday. What do you make of this if you're a potential Beto campaign?
That is still early. And keep in mind, he has not declared whether or not he's running. But those actually, with the second term, a sitting governor, those numbers are not necessarily good for Abbott. He's only 9% points ahead. And if you look at it, that's with 3 candidates. So I don't know if Abbott is sitting as comfortably, but remember, he is also running those ads online where he's attacking Beto. So he's acting as if that's going to be the person he's going to run against. But I don't think that Beto is as concerned now, but he does need to get out there and start campaigning if he's going to do it.
If he is going to do it. Ross, if you are the Greg Abbott campaign, what do you make of these numbers? How comfortable are you?
Well, I would be sort of comfortable with the general election, but that's a little bit downline. I think the first thing he's looking at is the GOP primary, and he looks pretty good in that race. People really don't know Allen West. and really don't know Don Huffines yet. They might by the time the election comes around, but that election starts pretty quickly. Early voting starts on Valentine's Day, so we're not far from that. The race further out is his, if you had it today, but he's also under 50%. And if you're an incumbent, you'd like to be over 50%, particularly in a race that doesn't have another name in it.
Yeah, indeed so. But I want to ask you about Republicans winning the big races last Tuesday. And what was so fascinating about it, as you point out, is that they did so without the help of Donald Trump. What does this suggest to people like Greg Abbott who have really bent to the right just to appease him?
Well, this is a big lift for the Republican Party. You know, they're energized. They won a lot of races without the former president having to step in and take control. They really got a big lift that they could win without. It's like life after Trump is looking bright for the Republican Party at this point. The other big event is that they won, without anybody calling for election audits and recounts, and they won all these races outright. I don't hear as many counts for audits this week.
That's a good point, Bernadine.
Keep in mind, Virginia had a Democratic governor. So it was basically a Democratic state. So you had to run because you had to run more into the center or moderate candidate, which is what they did. And they didn't need Trump to run in that. But now in Texas, you have a different ball game because Texas is Trump territory. But Virginia was primarily held by all Democrats. So the candidate won with a different message. And as I've said before, Democrats have a problem with their messaging.
Yeah.
And they need to, they must determine how they're going to deal with this CRT issue. Because many Republican candidates might use that in states where they can get away with it.
And that's something Ross pointed out earlier, CRT, of course, critical race theory, and that's something we will no doubt see as this continues. Guys, thank you very much for your time this morning. We appreciate that. Thank you for watching as well. We'll see you next Sunday.